Great place to spend our
So I should look at it.
That was unnecessary.
So then
Okay, it's 7 o'clock, we're gonna call a meeting in order, would you please stand for the salute of the flag?
thank you.
Pledge allegiance. Would the clerk please read the minutes of the previous meeting?
Regular meeting of town board, Monday, March 11th, 2013. The regular town board meeting was called to order by Supervisor Knor, present with Councilman Tracy, Councilman Barrows, Councilwoman Beckwith, Councilman Harvey, Superintendent Haas. Board led the pledge of allegiance. Attorney David Slottje, Community Environmental Defense Council Incorporated, gave a presentation to the board and answered questions from the board members. He described a moratorium as a law with an expiration date. Councilman Harvey referenced the town law manual asking about Secor. If the DEC regulations do not adequately address our concerns, we do have the legal authority to enact our own environmental regulations. Mr. Slottje replied that a town would not have the authority to go beyond the DEC. The Secor process is a test for environmental impact. We would have the right to do our own environmental impact assessment. Supervisor Knor asked Mr. Slottje if he would guarantee to stick with the town going forward. Mr. Slottje replied he would, and another option might be earth justice. Roger Monaco advised it would be wise to have a legal defense in our pocket if we were going forward with a moratorium. Councilman Harvey asked if there is a time limit that a moratorium can be for. Mr. Slottje replied, no, however, it has to be reasonable. A moratorium must have a purpose. Supervisor Knor asked what the difference between a moratorium and a ban is. Mr. Slottje replied, an expiration date. Mr. Slottje stated that compulsory integration has nothing to do with pipelines. Pipelines are regulated and we have no say. Currently, the gathering lines, smallest lines used, can be addressed with land use regulatory. Councilman Harvey asked about compressor stations, if they are addressed in laws. Mr. Slottje responded that we probably don't have any say. We certainly don't have land use authority. Supervisor Knor asked if the towns have any say on compressor station noise, possibly with a noise ordinance. Mr. Slottje replied no. Supervisor Knor asked what kind of time it would take to prepare a moratorium. Mr. Slottje replied, there isn't a lot of legal time involved, possibly 45 to 60 days. The board thanked Mr. Slottje for his time and presence at the meeting. Mr. LaTourette spoke to the board regarding the previous presentation. He had 3 things he wanted to point out about the presentation. He stated that the lawsuit made in Oxford was very serious, that no attorneys are free and somebody is paying their bills, and the board has an obligation to remain unbiased. Attorney Monaco stated that the board has a tough decision to make, that his job is to implement whatever decision is made by them. Attorney Monaco also spoke to the board about the school bus garage. He stated that the deed from the town to the Oxford School District was never filed, however, it will still have to go for a vote. The clerk read the minutes from the February 11, 2013 meeting. A motion to accept as read was made by Councilman Tracy and seconded by Councilman Barrows. All in favor, motion carried. Supervisor's financial report was read. A motion to accept as read was made by Councilman Tracy and seconded by Councilman Harvey. All in favor, motion carried. Highway warrants read, vouchers 28 through 34, totaling $3,122.69. General warrants read, vouchers 35 through 46, totaling $19,558.76. And prepaid warrants read, vouchers 21 through 29, totaling $3,285.43. A motion to pay all warrants as read was made by Councilman Tracy and seconded by Councilman Barrows. All in favor, motion carried. Highway report, Superintendent Haas reported that even if we get snow, there won't be a lot of plowing done because the dirt roads are very soft and the trucks tear up the roads pretty badly. They will do their best to clear the roads if it does snow. Superintendent Haas stated that Terry and Doug did a fabulous job through the winter when we had storms. They came in whenever called, left family functions if needed, and he would like to thank them publicly for their efforts. Road projects, Tice Road, Creek Road, and Strong Road. March 6th in Albany was a Highway Superintendent's Amnesty Day for the CHIPS program. The coalition asked for an additional $100 million this year across the state in CHIPS money. Superintendent Haas stated he has negotiated with Beck Equipment on the roller. He has them down to $56,000. There are a couple of scenarios we can go with. Councilman Harvey asked if the roller turns out to be a lemon, can we get out of the purchase? Superintendent Haas stated, yes, we can. To purchase a roller, it must go out to bid. Superintendent Haas intends to rent the roller for 4 months, and during that time, we'll put it out for bids. Terry's truck is at Wings Garage with electrical problems. Superintendent Haas stated he has been looking at getting another truck to replace the 93, which he would surplus. The truck he is interested in is a Marathon. It's a 96 Volvo 10-wheeler dump truck. It comes with a plow wing, 13-foot box with a tailgate sander, all of which are in very good condition. Councilman Tracy made a motion to offer between $18,000 and $23,000 for the truck, seconded by Councilman Harvey. All in favor, motion carried. Councilman Tracy made a motion to rent the roller for 4 months. Next month, the specs will go out to bid, with a bid opening at the May meeting. Councilman Harvey seconded the motion. All in favor, motion carried. Old business, Delta Engineering made a presentation to the board in February. After considerable discussion, Councilman Harvey made a motion to table the discussion until next month's meeting, seconded by Councilman Tracy. All in favor, motion carried. New business, Resolution 2013-6, Supervisor Canor offers the following resolution for adoption. Transfer $1,000 from A1990.4 contingency into A1220.4 supervisor's contractual for the purchase of a new computer. Seconded by Councilman Tracy. Roll call, 5 in favor, 0 opposed, 0 absent, motion carried. Superintendent Haas stated he contacted Frontier regarding his internet bill, and they'll be crediting us $99.98 for the error made in this month's bill. Motion to adjourn by Councilman Barrows, second by Councilman Harvey. All in favor, motion carried. Respectfully submitted, Donna Preston, Town Clerk.
Is there any corrections or additions to the minutes? I need a motion to accept the minutes
I
as read.
make a motion to accept the minutes as read. I'll stop it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. I now read the supervisor's reports. Under general, beginning balance, $184,589.69. Total revenue, $912.64. Total disbursements, $30,468.49. Leaving ending balance of $155,033.84. Highway, beginning balance, $424,258.84. Total revenue, $10.40. Total disbursements, $12,754.72. Leaving ending balance of $411,514.52. Capital reserve machinery, beginning balance, $198,388.44. Total revenue, $480. Total disbursements, $18,500, leaving ending balance of $179,893.24. Capital reserve unemployed, beginning balance, $14,913.31. Total revenue, 25 cents. Zero disbursements, leaving ending balance, $14,913.56. Highway building maintenance, beginning balance, $19,747.50. Total revenue, 34 cents. Zero disbursements, leaving ending balance of $19,747.94. Capital reserve, Emily Harold, beginning balance, $7,739.97. Total revenue, 71 cents. Zero disbursement, leaving ending balance of $7,740.68, and that is based on a $100,000 CD. A capital reserve town hall, beginning balance, $12,551.87. Total revenue, 21 cents. Zero disbursements, leaving ending balance of $12,552.08. Any questions?
Back under the capital reserve machinery, the disbursement of the $18,500, that is for the truck from Marathon.
Ten-wheeler from Marathon.
You definitely got in the low end then.
It got on the low end, yep.
Good thing we didn't start at 20 something like you wanted to, huh?
Yep. Sometimes if something's good, a couple counts don't make any difference.
So moved.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Clerk, please read the bills and warrants.
Highway warrants for April 8, 2013, beginning claim number 35. Schnagel Welding, $70.63. K5 Truck Parts, $37.85. Reese Marshall, $4,254.71. Steel Sales, $620. Tom Haas, $219.04. Tri-County Collision, $300. Unadilla Bolton Nut, $212.45, and Upstate Equipment Service, $46. Total highway warrant, $5,760.68. General warrant beginning claim number 47, Advanced Fire Protection, $84 and $285. American Legion, $500. Art Knorr, $147.47. Association of Towns, $500. Cincinnati's Home Centers, $147.04. Donna Preston, $87.01 and $27.98. Evening Sun, $8.10. Harding Brooks Association, $1,960. J.C. Smith, $214.99. McDonough Methodist Church, $300. Postmaster, $46. Reese Marshall, $825.63. Roger Monaco, $480. Roxana Harvey, $98.98. And Silan Tech, $890.91. Total general warrant, $6,603.11. And prepaid warrants beginning claim number 30, Frontier, $48.59, $121.32, and $15.60. New York State Teamsters Council, $194.22, and $2,054.98. NICEAG, $18.33, $315.23, $53.39, and $386.73. Total prepaid warrant, $3,208.39.
Anybody have any questions on the bill? Okay, we need a motion to pay the bills?
I'll make a motion, to pay the bills as read.
You have a second on that?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Okay, since our highway superintendent is here tonight, he asked me to read this report. He's vacationing in Florida. This last month of winter has caused us some hardships and truck breakdowns. Injectors, ECM, which is a computer on the dump truck, flat tires, coolant issues, all wear parts that wear out over time. The 1996 Volvo has been picked up and is at the shop. We ran it for one storm and parked it as a spare for now. The roller is going to be dropped off on April 22nd by Beck Equipment. The roller bids cannot be opened until August 2013, so in July it has to be advertised for all to bid. As soon as the weather breaks, we will be grading, rolling, and raking roads. We're also going to patch our oil and stone roads, weather permitting. Okay, we have worked out a sand stockpile with the DEC, David Lemon. We are going to be able to stockpile sand in the area west of our loading dock. We'll be back at the old stockpile site as long as we keep a truck road all the way around the sand pile and improve drainage around our two entranceways out back of the stockpiles. So that's his report for this month. Okay, now, old business, Mr. Slottje.
I prepared, and what I just gave each of you is a copy of a draft moratorium that is consistent with what I talked to this board about last month. essentially the purpose of the moratorium is to give the town time, a reasonable amount of time. This draft contemplates a one-year moratorium. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. So a reasonable amount of time, in this case 1 year, to allow the town time to study the impacts, effects, and possible controls over the activities that are covered by the moratorium. And then to consider, depending on what you find after you do the study, consider enacting new laws or amendments to existing laws to address the same. So as I said last month, this is essentially a timeout, and it gives you time to determine whether you want to do a road use protection scheme, a road use law, a road use agreement, and so forth. By the way, you asked me last time to look into the enforcement mechanism issue. We're still trying to get an answer on that. It looks like what most people do is use a constable. The supervisor mentioned that that was an expensive option. I'm learning more about that than I wanted to know to begin with. But apparently part of the reason that's so expensive is that the various municipal insurance agencies that cover regular law enforcement officers do not cover the constables. And that's why the constables are so expensive, because you've got to load in that insurance component. But we're looking at that and trying to find out what other municipalities do, other municipalities that don't have a code enforcement officer on staff. So we are looking at that, but I don't have an answer yet. I can do whatever the board would like to do with this draft document right now. I can take you through how it works. Either before or after that, I can explain what the mechanism would be for the board, considering this as far as what other steps have to be taken legally as far as public hearings and referral to the county under General Municipal Law 239A. I'm happy to do whatever you'd like me to do.
Well, I'll tell you what I'd like to do here tonight. We've been going over this now for 2 years with all of this, and we've heard both sides quite well. And I think what we should do here tonight, I don't know if we'll go any further with the board, but I would like to make a motion that we put in a 6-month moratorium, and that in November, we put this as a referendum on the general election. And the town can vote their own fate.
May I respond?
Yep.
So this draft contemplates 1 year, as I said. Obviously, you can make it 6 months, that's no problem. In New York State, there is no mechanism for the type of referendum that you'd like. A lot of town boards wish there was. In California, there is, for example. But there is a referendum concept in New York State, but it's only for very limited items. And unfortunately, this is not the sort of thing that you can have a referendum on, as a matter of state law.
So referendums would basically be something to do with statewide or countywide, or?
They're basically election-type issues, or if you wanted to opt out, if you wanted to actually if you wanted to change the term of your supervisor, for example, you can do that, since you're probably 2 years right now.
Yep.
I think you can make that 4, but there's things like that are referendum issues.
Within the governmental structure of town, then?
If you're a bond of town, you have to have a
Right.
referendum.
But, people understandably think that a referendum can be used here, because in California, for example, they use it for everything at the local level, the state level. That mechanism does not exist at this level in New York State, unfortunately. This has come up quite a few times.
Then I would draw a motion.
Um,
I try to be fair to everybody, both sides, because both sides are elected.
Well, I guess I have a question, comment. I got a phone call before the meeting, just trying to urge us not to do anything, and if the board were to pass a moratorium, they could we would be guaranteed that we would have a lawsuit. And my question is, what would that lawsuit be based on? I mean, in order to sue somebody, you have to show some kind of damages, don't you? Usually, or, I guess.
So the question, there are 2 questions there. The first is it the case that it is neutral to not do anything. In other words, I think what you were saying is whoever you spoke with told you the.
Basically, wait to see what the
Right.
state is gonna do.
Right, to wait. So the first question, is that neutral? It is absolutely not neutral to wait. Waiting has the effect of putting the town at risk with respect to regulatory takings claims. No lawyer disagrees. The lawyer who represents some of the people in this back of this room is on record. He's not here, but the lawyer, Mr. Wedlake, is on record that he agrees with my position that waiting to do one of these protective laws until after the DEC issues permits does increase the exposure of the town on regulatory takings claims. So that's point one.
Just explain the regulatory takings claim. What does that mean in everyday language?
Let me step back. I'm going to answer that question. Let me step back on the question of the guaranteed lawsuit. There are 150 municipalities in New York so far who have passed protective laws. Either temporary laws such as the moratorium that we're talking about tonight, or so-called permanent laws or bans. I don't like to use the word or the phrase permanent because every law, whether it's a moratorium or a different kind of law, every law can always be repealed, essentially right after you do it. But when I say permanent, I mean bans. When I say temporary, I mean moratoriums. There are 150 municipalities, mostly towns, some cities, some villages. In 125 of those, I have firsthand knowledge of the mechanism and the timing of how those laws were passed. Of those 125 laws, of which I have firsthand knowledge, I would say 105, 110 of those, so all but 15, the people on the other side have threatened, promised, guaranteed, in fact, lawsuits. Okay? So 115 out of the 150 have guaranteed lawsuits or promised them. In fact, there have only been 4 lawsuits filed, and I'll explain what they were for. And the second town that passed one got sued, the 4th town that passed one got sued, and then also Binghamton and Avon in Livingston County. All 4 of those have been resolved at the trial level by now. The last one was Avon, which came down in March. All 4 of those suits have found unequivocally, that the municipalities, the town involved, do have the legal authority to pass these laws. There is not one case anywhere in New York State at any level that says otherwise. Not one. Okay? There are some people who think there's one case out there that helps them, but it doesn't, it's not on point, and the judges in all 4 suits have said, including Avon, have said that that particular case is not on point. Now, with respect, so I'm going to talk about regulatory takings in a minute. With respect to the guarantee of the suit, I wish Mr. Monaco were here. As I said, this comes up in virtually every single case. And the reason it comes up, we believe, is that the people on the other side, whether they're in your town or coming from some other town, their real goal is not to prevent one of these protective laws from being enacted, we believe. We believe their real goal is to prevent one of these laws from being enacted prior to the time that the DEC issues drilling permits. Because under those circumstances, if you wait for the DEC, and the DEC has said that they're going to issue permits 10 days after the SKICE issues, if you wait for the DEC, you increase the chances that your town can be liable on a regulatory takings claim, which I'm going to explain in a minute. So we think that the people aren't even trying to make sure that you don't pass one of these. We think their real plan is to make sure you don't pass it until after the DEC issues permits for the reasons I said. Now, normally, I have this discussion quite often with town boards, and normally I say what I just said, which is 115 of these towns have been threatened, less than 4% have been sued, all 4 could have had free lawyers. In the case of Avon, for example, I don't know who your insurer is, if it's NYMER. NYMER, is it NYMER?
I don't know.
Okay, but Nymer, for example, there was not a penny paid by Avon because Nymer defended that, provided the lawyers to defend it as part of their insurance claim. Just in this county, however, I normally end my discussion on that there, but just in this county, over in the village of Oxford, when this came up, they received the same sort of whispers and phone calls, including guarantees of lawsuits. And I showed that on my slide to you last time. And Marcellus Drilling News predicted that it would cost its taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars, et cetera, to defend. Well, what happened in the village of Oxford is they said, the people said, some of whom are in this room, in the back, if you pass this law, we guarantee, if you pass a moratorium, we guarantee, we promise you, it's not just some threat, we guarantee we're going to sue the town, or the village rather, sorry. So the village actually did not pass a moratorium, they passed a ban instead. And what happened? There was no suit. And then, the next, about 2 days later, a gentleman who I didn't see tonight, but who was here and spoke to you last time about this matter, went online and told the people. Pardon? The gentleman went online and told everybody, this is a complicated issue, we're not going to talk about it online, but we will tell you that we know exactly how to defend and defeat this law. In this case, it was the ban in Oxford. But we're not going to do it. Even though we know how to do it, even though we know we can win, we're not going to do it because he called it low-hanging fruit. Okay? So they promised the village they would sue if there was a moratorium. The village passed a ban instead of a moratorium. There was no suit. And then the same people who had said all this went online and said, well, we could defeat him if we wanted to, but we don't want to. So I'll let you draw your own conclusions about that. Now, one of the things, as I said, I believe that the idea here is not to stop towns from passing these laws. I believe the real play on the other side is to make sure you don't do it until the DEC issues permits, and so they want to throw everything they can to get you not to do that, to slow you down. One of the things that they used to talk about is a regulatory taking. They don't talk about it too much anymore. They're talking about suing Albany now for regulatory taking, but they used to come to these towns, and when they would promise each town they would sue them, they would promise to sue not just on the authority issue. And again, there are only 4 cases in New York State. All 4 have unequivocally said you've got the legal authority to do this. There's not one case in New York at any level that supports their position. But the other thing they used to say, in addition to the authority, is that they were going to sue you for millions and millions and millions of dollars in takings claims. And what they meant was a regulatory taking. There's 2 types of takings. A taking that you know about, that most people know about, which is eminent domain. And what the Constitution says is that the government can take private property for a proper public purpose, but you have to pay, quote, just compensation. So therefore, if you're going to widen a road, for example, and you need to take 100 feet in front of somebody's yard, you can do that as long as that's a proper public purpose. But you've got to pay just compensation. Most people are familiar with that kind of taking. It's called eminent domain. And in that kind of taking, there is a physical dispossession. In other words, keeping what had been the owner away from that property by the government. In that case, at 100 feet in front of your property, the government says that's not yours anymore. There's another kind of taking that's very complicated. It's called regulatory taking. The United States Supreme Court has said that the area of regulatory takings is among the very most complicated area of law that it deals with. But very basically, what a regulatory taking is even if the government doesn't take that property away from you, so unlike the 100 feet that I talked about for the highway, even if the government doesn't physically take that property from you, if they pass a law that leaves you basically nothing else you can do with that property, then that's a regulatory taking. So the example is, I own all the property on the other side of this, or 500 feet of property on the other side of this wall. The other side is the ocean, and you guys decide to pass a law that says nobody can build on that property because you want the rest of the town to have a water view. In real life, people would fight about whether that was a proper public purpose, but let's just assume it is. In that case, and I own that property. You pass a law that says nobody can build because you want the rest of these people to be able to have a water view. In that case, that is a regulatory taking, because you left me with nothing to do with that property. However, if you had talked to a lawyer first, the lawyer would have said, don't do it that way. Instead, let him build a 1,200-foot building, no more than 1 story high, that deals with your issues, because people can still see over and still see the ocean and so forth. That wouldn't be a taking.
Yes.
Because what the law of regulatory taking is they look at what you could do with the property beforehand and what you can do with the property after this law, in this case a moratorium, what you can do after that with that land. And as long as there is more than a sliver of value, that's actually what the law says, as long as there's more than a sliver of value left, it's not a taking. So let's say that I'm just picking something out of the air. Let's say I had a dairy farm, and you passed a law that said, this moratorium, that said these very narrow areas of activities that I can no longer do, the gas drilling activities. Everything else I could do with my dairy farm, I can still do. The only thing I can't do is the gas drilling activities. That is not a regulatory taking. No way, no how. And there's a reason that the other side has stopped saying that it is, except about Albany. The first town that was sued here was Dryden. And in Dryden, the gas company had spent $4.7 million, almost $5 million, to buy leases in the town. Same thing is going on here. People called the town board, said we're going to sue. Same thing is going on here. Most of the people who called weren't from the town. Some were from adjoining towns, some weren't. But they decided, and the town of Dryden passed the law. They brought in a guy named Tom West. Tom West is considered to be, by all accounts, the go-to lawyer for the gas industry in New York. The #1 lawyer for the gas industry in New York. Before he sued Dryden, he did something very unusual. He spent 2 weeks, and he crisscrossed upstate New York, and he told everybody that his client was going to sue Dryden, but not just for the authority issue that I talked to you about, in other words, whether the town's been preempted, but on this takings issue. And he told everybody. He started with Susan Arbiter on Capital Connection in Albany, and he went all across upstate, talked to as many people as he could, radio interviews, and promised, he spent 2 weeks doing this, that he was going to sue the town of Dryden for millions and millions of dollars of takings liability. When he brought the lawsuit, there was no takings. There was no claim for financial damages at all, which is a long segue into your question about what do these suits look like. There wasn't a penny's worth of liability alleged in that suit. Dryden, of course, won. Mr. West's client lost. The day that they lost, which is on February 21, 2012, Mr. West said he wasn't sure if his client would appeal on the authority issue, but that they were going to bring a takings claim, and that it would be a big one. 2.5 days later, on 2/24, and an hour and a half before the Middlefield decision came down, which came down the same way, that said you absolutely have authority to do this, but before he knew that came down, Mr. West said, we're not going to be bringing a takings claim. And he basically told people why there wasn't one. And there was a whole bunch of reasons there isn't one. There is no regulatory takings claim on these lawsuits. There is not there's not a lawyer in New York State that I know of, even on the other side, who believes that there is, at the legal level. They don't even threaten that anymore. Now they're threatening, they're trying to raise money to sue the state for a regulatory takings claim on a different count. And they basically have said, their lawyer has said of record, he's not really sure what the cause of action will be. In other words, what the grounds for the suit will be. He's going to talk to some, quote, constitutional experts to try to find a way. But to go to your question about when they sue, what they typically sue for, what they would sue for is this authority issue. And that is whether or not the town has the legal authority to pass this, as opposed to being preempted or your authority taken away by that gas mining statute. That particular issue, that specific issue, has been addressed 4 times now in New York State since 2012. No other cases. All 4 have said, and they are bans, they are zoning amendments, they are moratoriums, and in one case in Binghamton, it was a law that the city didn't think was a moratorium and didn't think was a ban, but the court said it was a moratorium. So if you want to look at it that way, it's two zoning amendments / bans, and 2 moratoriums, the plural of moratorium is moratoria, but I don't say that. And all 4 of those cases have said the same thing. There were no, in Binghamton, Dryden, Middlefield, and Binghamton, there wasn't 1 penny's worth of financial damages alleged. So in that case, the exposure of those municipalities was simply for legal fees. And in all 3 of those cases, those municipalities could have had free lawyers. And did in one case didn't, but is now using a free lawyer on the appeal, and in another case didn't. In the 4th case, Avon, in Livingston cases, they had the same issue, which everybody else does on authority, but they also brought a $50 million takings claim. And they got thrown out on summary judgment. And that didn't cost the town a penny, because neither defended it at legal fees. So, respectfully, I'm not the person to ask what would be in that lawsuit. The person who made the call would be the person. But what I can tell you is that in virtually every case that this comes up, somebody gets calls like you got. Even in this county, it was virtually guaranteed, just in a village over. And instead, so they said, fine, we won't do a moratorium, we'll do a ban. And even after the guarantee, there wasn't anything. If there is anything, as I said, we will defend it. I can't do this until I'm not gonna go in, I can tell you in front of this group, we'll defend any of these suits. If you wanna talk about other groups that might, I would then respectfully ask that we go into executive session to talk about that, because the people who are most apt to, or to be the ones threatening to sue are in this room. So I don't think it would make sense to go into some of that. But there are free lawyers, and if you don't want us, there are 300-person lawyer firms that will do it for free. And again, I wish that Roger were here, because in the case of Oxford, it's my understanding that before Oxford moved forward, they did get confirmation from 3 different firms. Our firm, along with a lawyer named Joe Heath, Earth Justice, and I believe it was Natural Resources Defense Council. So, I don't know if that answers the question.
Yes. I've got something I wanted to bring up, but if somebody else got a question, give me a
You
chance
said
to look at
150 towns, 150 out of Palmetto.
Depends, there's 962 towns in the state, but it depends on how you, if you're looking at a percentage, it's hard to do that, because as far as your, I get these confused, but I guess the denominator is on the bottom, whatever, the one on the bottom. Most people say 962 should not be the number on the bottom, because all of those downstate, they've protected the water supply of the downstate communities, so they don't have any reason to do that. So you could say, even if you say 150 out of 962, that's a lot. But most people say you shouldn't use the 962, because whatever it is, 200-300, all the downstate communities are out of this because they're already protected by the DEC. So there wouldn't be any reason for them to do that. So I don't know is the answer. It's big in terms of population. Thank you. Yeah, and the other thing I'll tell you, someone just handed me, there's an organization which we think is terrific, called fractracker.org. And you can go on and find their list. But we know that there are towns and villages that have passed these protective laws that are not on this list, because we've worked with them and represented it. They just don't want to be on the list, so they're just way under the radar. So it's actually more than, we've said this to Frac Tracker, we can't tell who it is, but there are actually more towns that are on this list. But if you want to get a look, could I give this to him? Yeah. But fractracker.org will give you a pretty good idea.
You said here last month that responded that you couldn't do anything with the, let me see, you responded that you probably can't do anything about the abatement of the compressor stations. We certainly don't have a land use authority. Now, what do you mean by land use authority?
This kind of law.
law here, it has land use authority in it.
Yeah, that's what, this is a police power-based land use. Now, the issue with compressor stations is that most people believe that the compressor station follows the pipeline, or is part of the pipeline. So if you've got a compressor station that relates to a big FERC-regulated pipeline, the theory is that most people believe you can't regulate that compressor station any more than you can regulate the FERC pipeline. Same thing with the middle-size PSC, New York State Public Service Commission regulates the middle-sized pipelines. Same thing obtains. If the compressor station is part of that, chances are the people who run that pipeline are going to assert that only the state has jurisdiction. You do have jurisdiction. The locality does have jurisdiction over the gathering lines, and although the state PSC is looking into taking that away. The other thing I want to mention is that the lawyers who work in this area every day, and not every lawyer can be an expert in everything, but the lawyers who work in this area every day generally concede or agree that you cannot, at the local level, regulate compressor stations. In other words, even if it weren't part of the, from a noise standpoint, that even if it weren't part of the pipeline mechanism, that telling this industry how loud it can be, telling this industry whether it can operate 24/7, because normally, with most industries, we don't have zoning here, but in most industrial uses in towns that do have that kind of legal mechanism, they can say, look, we want you here, we want the jobs, et cetera, but we don't want you working from, say, 11 at night till 7 in the morning, either because of the noise or because of light or whatever it is. Everybody I know who works in this industry, about this industry, agrees that the town does not have legal authority to regulate noise. Tom West, who again is the gas company's, the gas industry's go-to lawyer in New York, he said in open court on March 21st in Albany that it's his opinion, which I happen to agree with, that the towns do not have authority to regulate noise, which is...
So actually, what does this law control, I mean, what can we control with this law?
The main thing that you're controlling here, I mean, you're controlling, wells if there are going to be any wells, but I don't know if there are going to be wells or not. But the big thing that this does is the so-called support activities. We pick up compressor stations, but again, those compressor stations are just going to be ones that are tied to these small gathering lines. And then so we're picking up the compression facilities, the processing facilities.
What page were you on?
I'm sorry, this is page 4. These are defined terms, so they're not necessarily going to... Do you remember what I talked about last month about the waste, how those things were typically accepted and exempted from the various federal environmental protection laws? We're picking them back up, and we're picking up things like impoundments, evaporation ponds, pits. Now, the people in the industry will say, don't worry about that. The industry doesn't use those anymore. Well, fine. If they don't use them anymore, nobody should be upset that you're saying they can't do them here. But basically, facilities used for the storage or treatment of those wastes. We predict, again, these are defined terms, which I can take you through, but the waste dumps, that's where they dump this waste or their residue or constituents before or after treatment on land anywhere in this town. Underground natural gas storage, underground injection, etc. So the main thing, if you think that you're not going to be subject to, if there aren't a lot of leases around here, or might not be, and if you don't think they're going to drill wells, the main thing you get is these support activities, where they're dumping these bad things, whether or not they drill in your town.
Now, does this law outlaw injection wells?
Yes.
Now, how can we do that if we can't regulate them?
what the courts have said is that this kind of land use-based prohibition is not a regulation within the meaning of that gas mining statute, which again is Environmental Conservation Law 230303 subsection 2. What that law says is you don't have authority to pass laws relating to the regulation of the gas industry. And what all four courts have said, and there's not one decision anywhere in New York that says otherwise, is that prohibitions like this are not regulations of the industry. What they've said is that regulation of the industry is regulation of things like operations and processes, how far down they can drill, how many layers of casing, what the casing has to be made of, insurance requirements. Those are operations and processes. But prohibitions, all four courts have now said, those are not regulations within the meaning of that gas mining statute.
So it sounds like what you're saying is, if you're gonna have any input, have any kind of control or monitoring of this within the town, you better do it at the beginning, because once they're here, they'll make the case that, well, you're trying to regulate us. And you can't do that.
That's absolutely the case that they'll make, and that is the case that their lawyer made on March 21st in Albany. In court, I was there. Their lawyer's position, the industry's position, is if you don't have, they don't want you to be able to do this, but that if you don't have this, he actually used the phrase grid. They want to lay a grid over the entire state, except the part that's blocked out, you know, to protect New York City water, and basically, and Syracuse, and drill anywhere they want. And you know who I am, you know what my reputation is. My position, you know, as far as this industry, which I'm not an anti-gas person, I just believe gas has not proven, they haven't proven that this can be done safely. But even where I'm coming from, I do not believe that you can regulate noise or light or anything like that. And if anybody was, I think if anybody was going to try to argue you could, I'd say you can't. Or you can. The only people who think you can regulate noise in this industry, vis-a-vis this industry, or light or things like that, are people who don't work in this area of the law.
Well, when it comes to issues of possible well contamination, surface water contamination, or the stuff that's going into the air, the town, we have no say whatsoever once it's here. It's all up to the DEC, whatever they've determined, and if they enforce it, how they enforce it.
There are people who are very frustrated by this on both sides, but I'm focusing on sort of people who are pro-gas, this all or nothing approach. But this is not the fault of the lawyers who are explaining it. This is not the fault of the town boards who are working on it. This is the fault of Albany. Albany left a mechanism, it put a mechanism in place where it's all or nothing. And that's all there is to it. If you let them in, you can't tell them how to do it. That's all there is to it. And your only way to have any say over what they do once they're in is to say they can't come in. That's not me being some sort of, you know, that's what the law says. And that's what Mr. West said in Albany on March 21.
So you're saying they can't come in and drill at all if you put this in,
Right.
For the period of time.
For the period of time.
for that period of time?
And I'm also saying you can pull the plug on this or any other law. It's just like your dog catcher law. You can put something in here that says that this is 6 months or 1 year or 5 years and that we can never repeal this, and you can repeal it at your next board meeting or make a motion to.
But now to put this law in, you have to have 3 votes from the board to go to the planning board of the county.
Right.
The county's, what's that law, 239?
General Municipal Law 239M.
Okay. So you have 3 votes to go there. When they pick it apart and it comes back, you've gotta have 4 votes to pass it, right?
What 239M says is that anytime you pass, there are some people who don't believe that a moratorium like this has to go to the county. But I'm not gonna get into that. What 239M says is that with respect to a land use law, that you've gotta give the count, not just this board, but any municipal board has to send to their county planning people a copy of the law. And then the county people have basically 30 days, it's really 42, but essentially 30 days to tell you whether, to look at a couple of things. And the only thing that the county is allowed to look at, under 239M, its jurisdiction is limited to two things: county-wide impacts and intermunicipal effects, okay? So, if they look at those two things, and if they want changes to the law, you can make them, and then you still can pass your law with 3 votes. If they want changes or they reject the law, they don't get a veto over you, but in order to pass that law, you need 1 more vote. So in the case of a 5-person board, you would now need 4.
Now, when you say land use, land use, what form of zoning is that?
There is no zoning here.
Well, what's the land use law, actually?
A land use law would be, do we have a junkyard law here?
Yes, we do.
That's a land use law. And you don't have zoning because you have a junkyard law.
We have a refuse law also.
And that's a land use law, and that doesn't mean zoning. Again, my view, this is just my opinion, but it's an informed opinion, since this is all I've done for 3.5 years. My view is that when people will throw anything up to try and stop these laws, if you think about it, nobody's drilling right now. It costs more to drill than to get the gas. So I think the only reason people are so crazy about this is because they're trying to preserve those regulatory takings claims. And again, it's not that they want this, not at all, they don't want it to happen until after the DEC. So one of the things that they also throw up is they'll tell you, if you pass a moratorium, that's zoning. That is not zoning. As a matter of law, it's not zoning. There's nothing in here that talks about zoning. There's nothing here that magically turns this town into a town that has zoning, any more than your junkyard law did or your refuse law.
Now, Middlefield, they have about 32 pages on it, because I got it home. Can you do a lot more than zoning? You can, definitely.
Middlefield was a zoning amendment. Actually, Middlefield
They zoned industry out.
redid their zoning. And so that was a different animal.
They zoned heavy industry
Right,
out.
heavy industry.
I'd like to go back to this 239M.
Yeah.
Now, is this something that was passed by the New York State Legislature? I guess the thing that troubles my brain is, when I hear about this planning board down in the county, how many is there, 8 of them on there?
I don't know, it could be 6 to 8.
6. You have non-elected officials, is what I understand, and yet,
Here's what happened. It is an Albany law. I think it was well-intentioned. What it was supposed to do is protect, let's say, what's one town over from us right now? German. So let's say that German decided that they wanted to be the solid waste disposal capital of New York State. They wanted to have the world's largest landfill. And they were gonna put it right on the border of, which is where people always put their dumps, of McDonough, okay? I mean, nobody ever puts it in the middle of town. That's what 239M is supposed to do. It's supposed to protect against negative, adverse impacts. So, German comes in and they wanna do this, and that's gonna be really bad for you, because those are the only places that you can, maybe that's where your main roads are. So that was the intention of 239M. And that's pretty much how it's worked for basically the whole time it's been there. This gas thing is sort of, like so many other things, this gas thing has turned it up on its head. This gas has turned people who would normally be conservative, I'm not gonna get into political labels, but conservative people who normally wouldn't want Albany anywhere near their business. It's flipped those people, so now they're saying, let's let Albany make a decision. Similarly, this 239M, which was supposed to be a protective statute, so that you wouldn't get the world's largest dump on your border, or at least without one extra vote by somebody. They're now turning it into something else. But I understand your reaction, but it was put in for a different reason, to stop you having a dump on your border, as opposed to forcing you to have pollution coming into you, if that's what you're worried about. So it was well intentioned.
It was passed by New York
Oh,
State,
yeah.
giving counties
It's a
this
state,
authority.
it's a state law.
And I guess made it so whoever serves on these planning boards didn't have to be elected to it, they're appointed by,
Each county, not each county, but there are several, there are different mechanisms. There are some, in some larger counties, they actually have a formal planning department, and the head of planning might be the person who makes this decision. In some of the smaller counties and some of the rural counties, the people on it, there might be a planning person there, but there's a separate, it's the equivalent of a planning board, but it's a planning commission. And it might be all the people who are in the board of supervisors, if that's what they've got, or it might be a subcommittee. I've got some things on Shenango County, I'm not sure who's on it, but yeah, the people on it, I believe, are elected, but they weren't elected by you, they were elected because they're basically supervisors, you know, from another
So-
town.
so this moratorium, what supervisor talking about as far as, if this was passed, we don't have to spend a year figuring out the zoning plan of what has to be done in the town as far as, you know, I mean, subdivision laws, you know, what color your house has to be painted. You don't have to go down that road by doing this.
Not only do you not have to go, I mean, I did not anticipate that you would. I wouldn't, I would not want to, I don't want to talk about zoning at all. This has nothing to do with
Because I
zoning.
think 99.9% of the people here don't want to
Right,
talk about it
right,
either.
which is why I don't even want to talk about it. So, but I'll say land use, and again, you know, you've got a junkyard, you've got a refuse law, you know, that didn't turn this into,
So this law, we have to be a land use law.
right.
Now, what I wanted to ask is this, in 1981, the state of New York, this preemptive law, I'd like you to go into detail about that. Where it preempted, if all these towns, if you go through all this, they can throw it out, right?
So, in 1981, the legislature passed a law that basically said that that the town has no authority to pass local laws relating to the regulation of the oil, gas, and solution mining industries. You know what oil and gas are, solution mining is salt mining. We'll just talk about gas, but it applies to the same thing. So when the gas companies started talking about coming up here in 2007, 2008, they were going gangbusters in Pennsylvania. They rolled out a PR machine that basically said towns had no authority under the law you mentioned. That law happens to be Environmental Conservation Law 23-0303, subsection 2. And once again, what it says is towns do not have authority to pass local laws relating to the regulation of the gas industry. What the Court of Appeals of New York has said, and remember, Court of Appeals is the highest court in New York State, what they have said repeatedly, unequivocally, and unanimously, three things that typically mean a lot to lawyers, is that language relating to the regulation, what that means is that, and they've said this in the context of mineral mining, gravel mining, what they've said is that language means that not that a town can't prohibit the industry altogether, because a town can, they say, but that if the town lets that industry in, then the town may not regulate, quote, operations and processes. So those three cases at the Court of Appeals level are all in the gravel mining context, not the gas mining context. But that is what the highest court has said. There is not one case in New York State that says other than what I'm going to tell you. But there have been 4 cases now that have construed that language relating to the regulation in the context of the gas mining statute, this 1981 statute. And all 4 of those cases, and these aren't cases from 1850 when the law and society has changed. These are recent cases from 2012 on. And all 4 of those cases have said unequivocally that language relating to the regulation does not mean that towns may not pass these kind of protective laws. And what they said specifically is that these kind of laws are not regulation of the industry. because regulation of the industry is only operations and processes. So when people give you those notes, or you get them online, whatever yourself, those arguments have been specifically rejected by every single court, only 4, but every single New York court that has looked at it.
Now, Middlefield and Dryden, where are they, in the appellate court? They gotta go to the,
There are, in New York State, there are 3 levels of general courts of general jurisdiction. The first court is called the Supreme Court, and that's also called the trial court. They're at the county level. There are 62 counties in New York. The Dryden case was the first one. That was in Tompkins County, heard by a Cortland County judge. The second one was Middlefield, which is Otsego County. The third was Binghamton, which is Broome County, very conservative area. And in fact, the judge in the Binghamton case is named Liebes, and he is the cousin of Tom Liebes. And then in the western part of the state, in Avon, it was Livingston County. All 4 of those said the same thing. After you get to the Supreme Court, then the next level of appeal is called the Appellate Division. It's actually the Appellate Division of the Supreme Court, but we'll just call it the Appellate Division. There are 4 departments in the Appellate Division. If you lose at the trial court level, the Supreme Court level, you get to appeal as of right. In other words, the judges can't say no. You have the right no matter what. You don't automatically have the right on some types of cases to go up to the Court of Appeals. Whether or not you have the right to go to the Court of Appeals depends on a couple of things, including how many votes you got if you lost down below, and also whether or not the highest court, the Court of Appeals, is interested. If you know the federal system, it's sort of like certiorari, cert. When the U.S. Supreme Court grants cert, it's up to them. They'll do it because either there's a split in the circuits or they just think it's an interesting issue. So there's no assurance that this case is going to go to the Court of Appeals, despite what people say.
might not go any further.
Right, it might not. And when people say wait for the appeals, again, I don't understand waiting for the appeals. It's not like there are 4 cases that say yes, 3 cases that say no. What are they going to? All 4 cases have said the same thing. The people who want you to wait for the appeals are really just hoping against hope that, But anyway, so that argument has been briefed and argued, and in fact, in the Avon case, Energy in Depth, Marcellus basically said that the brief and the papers in the Avon case by the person who sued them was just perfect, just a textbook, beautiful example of outlining the gas industry's case. They said that in 2 different posts. And the judge there didn't like it at all. In fact, the judge there called part of that stuff frivolous. When you're a lawyer and a judge uses the word frivolous, that's not a good thing.
Now, what I want to ask you in some kind of detail from start to finish, if you put this moratorium in here for a year, what's the process you gotta go through? Because you have to work at that moratorium. You just can't let it lay there.
You're supposed to do something with a moratorium. This says that you're going to explore things. So there are a number of things you could do. You could charge this board, or you could create a committee, a subcommittee of a group of citizens. Typically that's done, and you want to make sure there are citizens, you would do this anyway, but you want to make sure there are citizens, a good representation of citizens from your town on all sides of the issue. You would normally put at least one of your board members on that committee as well, but you don't have to. And you would charge that committee with whatever you wanted them to look at, road protection schemes, visiting, trying to understand possible health impacts if this comes, whatever it was that you're worried about.
We're allowed to work on roads with this.
Absolutely. In fact, that's what most people, there are communities, believe it or not, there are people behind me who probably won't believe this, but there are communities who are very pro-gas, who have put moratoria in. And the only, as far as I can tell, the only reason they put it in was because they want to take a look at the road protection schemes. absolutely an appropriate tool for that. And again, as I said in my presentation last month, you know, consideration by a board like this of a moratorium, or even voting for a moratorium, does not mean that the people who voted for it have already made up their mind about whether gas is good for the community. The purpose of the moratorium is so that you can study it and make a determination. And again, it normally wouldn't be so critical, but in this particular use, because of the way Albany set up the law, you know, it's all or nothing with this. You know, Albany put you all in this position.
Oh, yeah. So you have, where does the comprehensive plan come in?
In a town that has zoning, New York State Town Law, section 272 hyphen lowercase a, 272 hyphen lowercase a, says that if you do have zoning, which we don't, but if you do, zoning has to be, quote, in accord with, doesn't define in accord, really, most lawyers think just means consistent, with a comprehensive or master plan. So in a community that has zoning, if you're going to do any kind of zoning amendment, that zoning amendment has to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. It's a good idea, it's a good, and by the way, it's not, a comprehensive plan is an aspirational document. And by what I mean by that is, it's got no force of law, it's not even a policy per se. But what it is that it articulates, it sets forth the community's vision for itself now and in the foreseeable 5 years, 20 years, whatever it is. And it takes into account, by the way, well-drafted ones take into account the comprehensive plans and the planning efforts of surrounding communities, because it's all together. But you don't, you're supposed, if you have zoning, it's supposed to be based on or consistent with that comp plan. So in theory, anybody who has zoning should have a comp plan. There are some towns that don't. But you don't need a comp plan in a town like this. It's a good idea. In the old days, well, anyway. But that could be one of the things you want that committee to look into, or even a different committee during this period of time. Would it be advisable for this town to consider a comprehensive plan? If so, what would be the funding sources? You can do a lot of it on your own, but most people use a consultant. What I was starting to say is in the old days you could get grants for that part, but nobody's got money for grants anymore. And if you do go that way, you have to go through some specific hoops that we could take you through. The law says you got to have this kind of committee, you got to do this, but it's nothing complicated. But
Now, let me ask you this. We put this in here, what are we actually going to gain? We're going to gain the time, and in the end, you would have to absolutely outlaw it to really gain what all these people want, right?
well, if you decided that everybody in, I don't know what the number is, but presumably that committee would make a determination whether or not, your website says this town describes itself as, quote, a serene oasis. So if,
We'd have to change the website.
you'd have to change the website if you let drilling in, probably. But I mean, it depends on what that committee, if that's how you do it, decides. But if you decide during this period that it's not enough to protect what the community values, it's not enough just to have road protection schemes, then yeah, you might want to go with a permanent solution. But, by the way, keep in mind that what we're talking about is fracking as practiced today. These guys have gotten a lot better in the last 3 years. There's every reason to think they're going to get better in the next 3 to 5 years, whatever it is. I mean, they're making serious improvements in how they do things. And, so if it turns out, if the committee determines that it wants to, what you say, call it a ban, but if 2 years after that, 6 months after that, everybody, closed-loop systems are not just voluntary, which they are now, but in Pennsylvania, but they're mandatory, and people disclose all their chemicals, instead of saying, well, you can find it on your own if you go to a website. If all the things that you worry about are gone, then whether you're in a moratorium or a so-called permanent law, you pull the plug. But you don't have, but if you don't do that first, you're gonna be talking to people about regulatory takings, I think, once permits start issuing. We don't concede that it is a regulatory taking, we absolutely do not concede that. But it's a lot easier, it's like that to defend it now, but once the permit's issued, it's gonna be harder to defend. We still think it's not a regulatory taking. I wanna be crystal clear, we do not concede that.
Yeah, but I got that here, I just paid for it too. Regulatory taking. It also says here, this paper here, let me find it here, that, to deprive the owner of all beneficial economic use of the property,
Right.
and that owner be entitled to monetary compensation under the Fifth and 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution.
Yes. But if it's only if you deprive of all,
Well, it says it's determined case by case in the courts.
that's true too, that's true about almost everything about the law. But if again, if I'm I don't wanna pick on dairy farms, if I'm a beef farmer, if I'm a corn farmer, whatever after this, I can still plant corn, I can still do my cows, whatever it is. That's not all economic value. That is why we can, assuredly tell you that ain't a regulatory taking. The Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution is where that, I was telling what I was quoting before. The 14th Amendment just makes the Fifth Amendment applicable to the states. So we're talking about the same thing. So it's, a taking by the government for a proper public purpose, you have to pay just compensation. But that's the issue. It's not, that's why it's not a regulatory taking, because it's not depriving them of all economic value.
They can still do what they want.
They can do whatever they could have done beforehand. And if, by the way, if that was nothing beforehand, if they want to say their land was totally worthless or before that, your law is not what caused that. Your law basically, as long as there's more than a sliver of value, is what those cases say.
Anybody else on the board got any questions for this gentleman here?
Just one clarification, I think I know the answer. What you're saying is that, we had a committee and, looking at issues from the roads to whatever, if there are specific things associated with the gas drilling, the one thing that's on my mind is like a diesel fuel, where I'd read online that the DEC, they have it to where diesel fuel cannot be the base of the fracking fluid. And when I read that, to me, that sounds like, okay, it can't be the primary number one ingredient, but they didn't say it can't be used. And I know around here, anywhere in the state, we had fuel tanks in the ground that were leaking, and the town was facing all kinds of fines and actions from the DEC because, we had some diesel fuel leaking into the ground, and yet this industry is getting permission to pump diesel fuel down into the ground. It just
at the federal level, I know the question is at the state level about DEC. At the federal level, the EPA, the reason that this industry got some of its on the Safe Drinking Water Act got its exemption is that they basically promised that they would not use, not just the base, they wouldn't use diesel at all in fracking fluid. That's how they got that exemption. And it turns out, this isn't just me saying it, it turns out, according to the EPA itself, the industry continues to use diesel in fracking fluid.
that'll make water real slick.
Now, on your question, if your question is, suppose we are okay with everything except we don't want them using diesel, we don't trust the DEC, or the DEC's not policing it, and we want to make illegal within our town the use of diesel as part, absolutely no way, you'll never find a lawyer that will tell you you can do that. That's a textbook example of regulating the industry, telling them what can be and what can't be in their fracking fluid.
That's what I figured.
So once again, it's an all or nothing situation.
How many towns in Schneider County have got moratoriums?
The only municipality in Shenango County is, Oxford, with the village.
Untrue. Not true.
Pardon?
I thought they just changed the wording in their zoning for that. They don't have an actual moratorium, do
They have a ban, which
Not
is,
true.
as the person who drafted it, I can tell you it's a ban. When a town
So it's
or,
only one village in the town.
right, with a town or village that has zoning, the ban the form the ban takes is a zoning amendment. There are 2 other municipalities in this town who have contacted us,
In the county.
in your county, in addition to yours and so, that I think are, at least interested.
Well, gets into quite a bit. If you decide to do it, it would take, you say, about 45 to 60 days, right?
If you decided to do it, the steps to take would be to send this to the county to get their view. And then at some point, you would, it would be mandatory that you have a public hearing,
Same as any other law.
just like any other law. And in some communities, they also have a public information session. That's not a requirement, unlike the public hearing, but at the public information session, normally you folks would sit to the side, you're present, but official business would not be conducted. But somebody typically would explain what is in the law for the citizens to see. And then there would be an opportunity, sort of like the public hearing, for people not to ask you questions, but to voice their opinion. So that's not a requirement. Some places do it, some places don't. But the public hearing is a requirement. Right.
Got to be a lot of reading here.
Sorry. This is a little longer than by about 3 pages than the moratorium looks like when we do it in a place that has zoning, because we have a mechanism in the back for a variance. Normally in a town that has zoning, we piggyback that on to the town's zoning board of appeals. We don't have one here, so we basically have to flip that to you guys on the town board to do that if somebody wants a variance.
Yeah, hardship cases are.
Right,
in there too,
right.
Is there a savings clause in this also?
Severability, there should be. I hope so. I drafted it. There's not a put one in, but. Yeah, section 10, page 12. You missing page 12?
Right here, with section 10, page 12.
This way? That's why I was smart. Okay, thank you.
This says it's 13 pages, but it's really 17 pages. That's what threw you off, because there's a 4-page appendix at the back.
Now, put this in, how about the enforcement part? We have to enforce this.
Well, we have the same, right now, what it says is a code enforcement officer or such other person or persons who, from time to time, you may designate. At some point, just like with your junkyard law, I assume, although I haven't read that.
That's not enforced.
Or your refuse law, which I haven't read. At some point, if you want to enforce any of your laws, we're either going to need to appoint either hire a constable or appoint a code enforcement officer. But it's the same,
And what's he doing now? He gives them a ticket, or what's he doing? You have to have the town lawyer prosecute the case.
the town lawyer, I think, has to prosecute the case on some of these things. But that's what we're looking at, because I knew this would come up here, because you asked it about the road use. That can't be, we're looking into whether or not these sheriffs can really say what they said, which is, they're supposed to enforce the law.
So what you're saying is these issues would be something we'd be looking at, working on, during the moratorium period.
Right.
So you don't need to have it all figured out
Right.
before you decide to put
Right.
the moratorium.
Right, because we're looking at it in the context of the road use. What we pulled was, we pulled it either from Windsor or Dickinson, one of those two is a pretty good road use protection. So we're looking at their stuff, but I think it's all gonna come back to the same thing, that most of these places have a code enforcement officer, and it gets laid at his or her feet, so we gotta figure out a workaround.
Someone still needs to enforce this law.
The same, yeah, like, that's what I'm saying.
Right
Just-
now, we have nobody to enforce this law.
Right, just like the junkyard, that's what I'm saying, it's just like.
So
the
we can,
junkyard.
if we put this law in, we have to have, we pretty much gotta have somebody to enforce it.
Well, that's like saying that, do you with your junkyard law?
Saying that we do not enforce it.
Right. So what,
Well, what good's this, we put it in and don't enforce it?
what we're really doing with this is we're trying to protect the town, to preserve the town's options, so that if, as, and when the DEC issues the S-Guys, and nobody knows when that's gonna be, but whenever that happens, whether it's next week, whether it's 3 months, so that if you decide at some time, when you do decide that so we're not afraid somebody's gonna drill tomorrow, there's no permits for tomorrow. What we wanna make sure, what we're stopping here, and this is why everybody is in the back of the room, what we're stopping here is the ability of these people to sue the town afterwards for regulatory takings. That's why they don't want these laws passed. So the issue here isn't that we're afraid the drilling's coming tomorrow. The issue is we wanna get this, if you wanna get it done, you wanna get it done before the permits issues. You can still pass it anytime otherwise. But then if you try to tell somebody who signed the lease or signs the lease afterwards, they're gonna sue you. They can sue you all day long now, and they're not gonna win. If you put this in before permits issue. That's what this is about, not that we think someone's gonna drill here tomorrow. The idea is, so on the enforcement officer, now, if somebody comes up from Pennsylvania and dumps a bunch of stuff here that violates this law, my guess, whether you call me or whether you call Roger, my guess is we'll find a way to enforce it really quickly. If somebody, so that is what could get picked up, not that I'm anticipating that, but as far as why you do. But what we're really doing here, this is why when somebody says it's neutral not to do anything, that's just wrong. This is the neutral position. This hurts no one. There's no drilling, there's no nothing going on, okay? And that's what they don't want you to know. When you don't do this, that's not neutral. That's saying at least, we might have regulatory takings claims.
This gives us a legal timeout for 1 year.
Yes, sir.
But as you described as regulatory takings, just think classic chess game.
Right.
And basically, if you don't do anything, and at all what you described, then you're looking at a checkmate situation. As far as, if the permits are issued and we don't have anything in place, then the lawsuits come.
We don't concede, we certainly don't concede checkmate. We do not concede it's a regulatory taking if you wait. But you've lost your queen, you've lost your bishops, you got one night if you wait. You do this now, we got all that.
We've played with this for 2 years. I've lost sleep, I've had phone calls, I've had threatenings, both sides. I make a motion, we call for a timeout for 1 year.
I second it.
Okay, we'll have roll call on that.
May I interrupt before you?
Yeah.
So what would be involved in that at the first stage is that you would vote to send this to county to look at. And then you may or may not also want at this point to schedule a public hearing, or you might want to wait until you hear back from county on that. there are any number of things. Your first thing to do would be, and if you do that, I would suggest that you, that the motion actually be that the clerk send it to send or cause to be sent, and then she could delegate it to me, because we want to make sure that the proper forms are filed with the county.
I'll make the motion that we cause the send, have the town clerk to cause the send the moratorium to the county for approval for 1 year.
And I'll second that motion. Hang on.
Important decision, so we'll have a roll call on it.
Councilman Tracy,
No.
Councilman Barrows,
Yes?
Councilwoman Beckwith,
No.
Councilman Harvey,
Yes.
Supervisor Canor,
Yes.
3 in favor, 2 opposed, 0 absent. Motion carried.
Okay, that was one part. What was the second part to do?
Well, if you wanted to, you could, you could schedule a public hearing now. You may not want to do that. If you wanted to, you could also schedule either your next regularly scheduled meeting or a working session. You might, after you go through, you might have questions that you might want me to answer. That would be appropriate, either call me individually or I could come. It's a lengthy document and you may have questions.
I think under the circumstances with a 3-2 vote, I would make a motion that we hold off on the public hearing until we hear back from the county as far as what their reaction is to this.
Right. And make sure that you've read it.
Exactly.
And that you've got it.
It's hold off on the public hearing until we hear back
From the county, and
Get a chance to read this.
And then you can decide either now or among yourselves, and you can call me whatever, but if you'd like me to come either to the next meeting to answer any questions you might have, or at a different date, especially, again, you can tell me now, or you can call me. Supervisor's got my, whatever you want to do, I'm happy to do.
There's a motion and a second.
I made a motion that we hold off calling for a public hearing on this
I'll
matter.
second that.
Councilman Tracy,
Now, this is
to hold off
just to
on
hold
the
off
public
on a
hearing.
public hearing.
So you're
Yeah.
here. Councilman Barrows,
Yes?
Councilwoman Beckwith,
Yes.
Councilman Harvey,
Yes.
Supervisor Canor. 5 in favor, 6 opposed, 0 absent. Motion carried.
I would, my prediction is that phone call you got guaranteeing the suit, you're gonna have more of those, maybe in writing. I would suggest respectfully, your town lawyer is Roger Monaco. He represented the village, when this came up. I would respectfully suggest that you talk to him, and ask him what happened in Oxford, because they got the same threats, if that's the way you want to go. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Slottje.
Yes, Slottje, time for you to go home, right?
We'll get back to our meeting, huh?
Yep.
I'm glad I got that thing finished.
Very good value. Okay, now, last month, Sherry
dip into his budget for it, so.
Yes. Table that the next meeting.
I'll make a motion to table Dell Engineering till next month.
One second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And the school bus garage, we're waiting to May 21st, so they put that on the budget vote for the school, and the public has to vote on that, so I'm pretty sure we'll get it.
Okay, that goes to the public vote.
Yep. Now, this is about the time of the year we advertise for a fuel bid. So we have ready for a.
Can we have quiet so we can hear what's going on here? Thank you.
Well, we're talking about fuel bids right now.
It's the noise in the back of the room they're referring to.
Oh. We're talking about fuel bids right now. Before what I said, if you couldn't hear me, the school bus garage over here, which we're supposed to get from the school district, the highway department's supposed to get it, and the public vote on that May the 21st. And then as soon as the vote is in, we should be able to have the property. Now, the other part we're looking at is fuel bids. We have to advertise to send out for fuel bids.
Make a motion, we advertise for fuel bids, be open at the next meeting.
One second.
All in favor?
Aye.
What's this about Brewer property?
Okay.
Speak up here because there's definitely a hum in the back of the room.
Well, I can hear this one.
I know you can, but the audience can't hear.
I'm gonna put an audio system in here one time. Okay, you want, town clerk will read this paper here, what this is all about.
Okay, authorizing acquisition of real property from Shenango County. Whereas there exists a parcel of land in the town of McDonough that is available from Shenango County via tax foreclosure, and whereas that parcel is identified as tax parcel number 155.1-15, whereas section 64 of town law grants town boards the authority to acquire and convey real property, and whereas the town McDonough Town Board desires to acquire said parcel of real property for town purposes, now therefore be it resolved that the consideration of $1 plus the taxes owed of $4,101.24 and applicable county clerk's filing fees, the supervisor of the town of McDonough be and hereby is authorized to execute on behalf of the town of McDonough any such documents and/or agreements as may be required to acquire said parcel of real property identified as tax parcel number 155.1-15 in the town of McDonough from Shenango County, New York.
We need more room, and, we have a good chance to pick this property up for that place.
And that's almost an acre and a half. The purpose would be for sand pile
Or salt
storage,
shed, or whatever. you
salt
want.
shed, park equipment.
Anything. As long as it pertains to the highway, it would be part of the highway department's property.
What the amount of taxes we get in a year on that?
How much taxes?
Do we get in a year on it when it's,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's not really that much, I don't think.
Well, if it's 4,000, well, there's penalties and all of that, but 3 years, it
About
must be,
3 years.
must be close to $1,000 a year,
1,200.
but we don't get that.
No, you don't get all that.
no, well, we still benefit from all that.
We've done it.
The problem is you're taking it off of tax rolls as soon as you count them.
Well, the big issue we have with the sand pile, or we have had, is the possibility of over the bank, a mishap, or salt leaking into Jennigansett Creek.
That whole thing drains downhill, I mean, if you wanna take a chance, you can say it can't happen, but it happened with the fuel tanks.
Well, the only thing is, I looked at it, is they got a better access around, we can, for
I
now.
wonder how many fuel tanks are still on the ground over there.
according to.
One old West End gas
Yeah,
station.
I know, I just thought about that.
They're more to that property that meets the eye.
That property's got a bunch of fuel tanks and it's got about 15 or 20 cars buried under it.
If you wanna take it, then don't take it.
Well,
Then,
let's
don't put
discuss
sand
this a
down that
little bit
creek either.
further then. Yeah, there was a gas station there, definitely. What kind of money did it cost us to get our, well, this they're not putting tanks in to replace them, they're just taking them out to get rid of them, to fill it in.
Depends on if there's any contamination. Shit. You don't know.
What's in the cars, Donnie?
What?
What's in the cars that are buried in their bodies,
Oh, I
or?
guess the oil, the oil and everything.
Yes.
The oil and gas and everything else. I think that should have been divulged before, they ever sold any land around it even.
Just something to think about.
You can go to the DEC website, if it's listed on there as a hazard site, it'll be there.
If they know about it.
If they know about it.
Or you can go to Target, they know everything.
Um,
You get it from the DEC website.
So in order for this to happen, is this a decision has to be made tonight?
It's gotta be before, pull it off the tax,
Before they put it up for tax sale.
yeah.
We can
It's already up.
acquire it before it goes to the public.
Well, the 4,000, 4,100, that sounds real reasonable to pick it up for
Might not
that,
even
but,
be that, it might be even less.
oh,
because
okay.
we haven't got the final figure.
But if it costs us 50,000 to clean the place up, you know. When's the tax sale, you know, what date that is?
Amazing.
I think the
next
properties
meeting
get
is the
listed in
13th.
May and the sale is in June, the tax sale, if I'm not mistaken.
I missed the first part.
They list the properties that are going for tax sale in May, and they put them out to the public for a month or 6 weeks, and then I believe it's in June when you have to actually bid. I don't
So-
understand when you would have to step in front of that, I have no idea. But that's typically Shenango County's tax sale. I bought a couple on there, so I follow it every year.
I think we need to check into this a little bit before we might jump into the money pit here.
Yeah, also, if you, of course, like right now, Tom has an agreement with this guy from the DEC, but there's nothing in writing. If you don't have it in writing, you don't have it. What are you gonna do? You're gonna go to court?
Oh, I
The DEC
understand
can't
that.
have it?
Right now, the DEC is willing to make an agreement with that. We go over there and we've got tanks that are leaking underground and cars, oil and whatever, the DEC could be a
I
real
don't know how
problem.
many dying won't got buried over this place, either.
Well, we're not buying his tonight.
I mean, who knows if they're really
Pat, you
there?
also gotta look at what it's gonna cost to tear the house down, the garage down, and the trailer down. You know, you're probably gonna have 10 grand in that.
And also with that, you can get the state of New York and the chips are in the paper.
Well, it's still money you're spending that you could've spent somewhere else also.
The next meeting's the 13th of May.
Well, if you're never gonna get, foresee in the future, you're never gonna expand your land, that piece of land you got there, is a hell of a lot. It's all downhill grade, you're already cranked up here, that's got 500 and something feet of road.
No, I think it would be great to have the thing, just concerned if,
Well, if it was an old gas station, what would it have, 2 tanks in it?
I think there were 2 pumps if I remember correctly.
will, that's right.
So,
The well
right.
was
May
contaminated.
I ask
do
a
know
question
that.
regarding this,
What?
please?
The well was contaminated, I do know that,
Well, there's lots of wells in McDonough contaminated,
with gasoline.
well, with methane anyway.
Oh,
She's got a question
can
here.
I ask a question, please, with regarding this? My property is adjoined to it. Are you gonna, and it runs downhill, are you gonna guarantee you're not gonna contaminate my farm animals my private well and everything else that's adjoined to the property, when it runs all downhill, if you start digging this up or putting sand, whatever you're gonna be
Well,
doing with it,
you would put a barrier in there, yes.
you're gonna put a barrier down to protect my well.
And the thousands of pork trucks.
You're gonna protect all of it, you're gonna protect my animals and all the contamination that you possibly could do.
What kind of a barrier do you have now with the state throwing salt in front of your house every day?
I'm saying if you're gonna put it right next to my well, your salt mine
Our
next
well
to my
backs
well.
right up to that property. Our property and pond that runs into Jenny Ganslet backs up to that.
That's my question.
I mean, you got a problem with DEC right now with your salt running in Jenny Ganslet.
No, we
You
don't
gonna build a
have-
barrier for
We don't have
that?
a problem yet, but we're foreseeing we will in the
We
future.
don't have any salt back there, we only have sand. The salt's up front now, right?
Yeah. Salt isn't even over there, are we?
We used to have, the county had a problem down there because they mix salt with sand.
That's why, and I worked at the county at the time, that's why we moved it out of there and for Celia to get it away and alleviate the issue. There was no, we couldn't put liability on the town for what we were doing. That was my second year there. First year we stockpiled in McDonough, second year we got it out. So that was 9 years ago.
Well, we go on the same ground, we buy that, we get digging into it, who knows how much money, you know, I'd be a little concerned with the tanks and stuff that are in there now, you know, your well contamination too, to be honest with you. You know, no matter who buys it.
Right, but I'm just saying, you start digging, you start putting all this stuff on there, like you're opening up another big can of worms.
Kinda like rehabbing an old house, you just don't know what you're gonna get into till you start ripping and tearing. And to try to, get some kind of an environmental engineering type person to come over and evaluate the situation, I'm sure that would, time and money, to give us some kind of, if they can, give you some kind of an idea of what problems lie under the ground there.
Well, we could probably spend $20,000-$30,000 to do an environmental impact study, and what is it really worth it for us?
No, just a thought, I'm running by you.
Well, it's, hey,
Not about a hundred for a piece of property, especially location, because
We own a park down here, we put sand pile down there.
where,
Well, we got a park, we got a perfectly good spot right there where the tennis court is. It's already blacktop.
So now I can't play tennis?
I'm just saying, it'd be a good place for sand, it costs us a lot less.
I don't have to play tennis.
I can't put up the shove it.
I'm just hesitant
Because
as far as,
Minshaw, you can't do that. You can't even dump ditch dirt up there.
well, okay,
I would say, it's a good idea, Art, I just think we need more information before we, I say we may be plunging into something there that,
yeah, well, I don't know who you, like John said, you're gonna hire somebody who's gonna do that, that might end up, well,
I mean, if it hadn't been a gas station, it was just, you know, a house sitting on a acre and a half, that'd be one thing, but, yeah.
the only way you could have to find out, you have to have a giant, like, dryer there, who took the tanks out for the town, and you have to see what's what there.
Yeah, and if the thing, I mean, if, I don't know what size the tanks were, but if they were full at one time and they've been leaking, you know, who knows how much dirt would have to be excavated out of there. I mean, you can have quite a pit there.
No, if the tanks are half full, they'll still be leaking in their wells, you know what I mean? But once we don't own it, then we have a problem. Okay, that's just a thought. Also here, I wanna bring up, what do you wanna do about the home issue? You wanna keep Lisa on, or what is it?
Seems
don't have to put it out to bid,
No.
it's not enough money to have to.
I talked to Jerry, and the price he's got on there is exactly what he did, same price as last year. So he didn't up the price, and I just told him I would bring it over so Art could see it and the board could consider it.
Because by next meeting, we'll have to start mowing.
Yeah.
I guess I'll make a motion, if he isn't gonna raise the price, and we have Reese do the mowing at the parks again this year. I didn't see there was any complaints last year, so.
It's like every Friday, they were there in East McDonough doing that one. I mean, they did a great job. I'll second it.
Okay. Any more discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Now, I guess that's all. Anybody on the board have anything you wanna bring up before the board? Okay. All right, you're gonna have a half an hour, you got 5 minutes apiece to talk if you want, who would like to talk, public comment?
Thank you, Art. I'd like to start to say, I'm a little saddened that you didn't open it up to, public comment before your vote, but that's your discussion. I'm handing out a couple things to the board that relate to some questions that have come up in the last few meetings. One has to do with surveys and how the validity of them. The other has to do with water consumption, and the use of wells, and, the longevity of it. The combustion of the well creates water vapor that actually creates more water, but you can do that yourself, as well. I guess I'd like to start by saying, as the, I guess you'd say it, the fathers of the town, we'd hope that you'd have vision. And having vision's like playing chess, you need to stay a few moves ahead. I'd like to back up. I live here, I own 3 pieces of property in McDonough, but I also work for North Energy, the gas company. So, I wanna get that on the table.
And your name is?
Jeff Barrows, I'm sorry, I should have started with that. You see people down at Oxford and all over with signs that say, "Save McDonough from the evil industry and the gas drilling." But we have no store, we've got no restaurant, we've got 1.5 active dairy farms. Oxford School District, my son's in UPK. 36 kids in his class. I graduated in '81. The hospital in Norwich, they're sending half their staff home 1 or 2 days a week early because there's no work for them. Are we gonna have a hospital here? The vision that some of these towns, including ourselves, have is broken, and I believe we need to do something to save it. I'm not saying gas drilling is the answer, 100%, but we need something. And I think you can all understand that. You see what you're up against regularly with just trying to balance your budget. So, I know that there's been a petition going around McDonough, and that, I've heard it has upwards of 250 signatures on it. I don't know the numbers, I'm guessing here. With both my bachelor's and master's degree, I've worked a lot in, their sports management and rec management. They're both business degrees, and I understand the validity aspects of a petition. And unless they're done by a professional, they're done exactly the same way, there's no saying how true that is. That also will go with these figures. You can say that I'm twisting our figures, the coalition's twisting their figures. North Energy alone, just North Energy, has 87 gas leases in McDonough. 62 of those leases are owned by local voting people. So 2 of those are duplicates. We have 2 landowners who have 2 different leases. So that backs down to 60 households, approximately 2 voting people each, 120 people. The coalition, I work with them, they're telling me they have 125 plus voting, age individuals, added up 225. So the sad part that tells me is our town split right down the middle. That's a pretty tough place to be. But that also doesn't include people like myself, who are pro-gas, unleased, and not with the coalition. I have more property in Oxford than I have in McDonough. None of it's leased, but that's my choice. I guess my biggest question is, why a moratorium right now? I don't understand it. There's demands on a moratorium. You have to have an imminent risk, a hazard, whatever you want to call it. Without permits being issued, I question the fact, is this going to be a valid moratorium? I'm not an attorney, but I've seen the cases come down, and I question that. I believe, in my heart, I don't know, but I believe that's why the village of Oxford backed away from the moratorium and went with, they have zoning in place. They were able to put in, a change in their zoning amendment and call it a ban. I believe that's why they did that, because it wasn't gonna actually become a valid moratorium. So I guess, why a moratorium when you could already be working on, a lot of us know what the issues are gonna be. There's gonna be the road issue. Where's the water taken from? Where is it disposed of? What chemicals are gonna be used, et cetera, et cetera. So what steps have you done in the past 2 years while this is going on to do this? So even by putting in a moratorium, my question to you is, what steps are you gonna take to fix those? And that, they can be addressed now, without the moratorium. I've addressed this in a conversation with Art. I don't know if he passed it on, but I don't the only valid moratorium that I can understand is if it was put in place from the day the SGIS goes into effect to give you some time for things you haven't completed yet, and for anything that comes out in that unexpected. And that I can follow the logic in that. I honestly can't follow the logic in it now, but that's me. So I guess, I guess now's the time I was hoping to be proactive, and, there's all this talk about home rule, and I think you can use it in your favor. I mean, German, they put a referendum to use food grade fracking fluid, chemicals. Use the power of home rule to establish sound ground rules for the gas industry to work within, because, let's use this home rule to responsibly work with the only industry that's, willing to invest here and possibly create a very lively, future.
But wait, the water tells us we can't regulate it.
You're not regulating.
If you say you gotta use a food grade fracking fluid, that's regulated. We can't do it.
Is it? They're saying that there's home rule. I don't know. Mr. Slottje is an attorney. He probably is gonna tell me no. But they're saying, but my question is, they're saying that the state is gonna allow home rule. It's come out. So why not work with the industry to figure out what the issues are and try and resolve them? I worked for Norse Energy for 3 years. No one has ever called me and asked me a single question. Not one. Not one question.
I'd like to ask you a question.
Yes.
This slick water they talk about, what the hell does that really contain?
What do you mean slick water?
Slick water. We went over to Oleanta, it was put on, Leon and Terry and I, it was put on by the gas company there. And they said that slick water, and nobody would tell you what it is. Now, what's slick water? Water is just plain water.
Gotta do something to reduce the friction, so it goes through the pipe easier.
I'm at a loss at what you mean by slick water. Are you talking about the fluid, the water that you use for the fracking fluid that's the slick water? Is that what you mean?
It changes the
Again, they don't explain
viscosity
it.
of the water going down the pipe and opening up the fractures.
Yeah, okay, so it's in the frac fluid that's
Right.
going in. Okay, you're talking about the frac fluid itself, which is, majority is water and sand. in that. Norse doesn't frack any wells. We've never come up with it. What's been used in other, they've used all sorts of stuff. But to my knowledge, currently, there's 5 companies that are making food grade frack fluids that would be added in there. That relates to, Germans say, keep these chemicals. I live here, I've got 3 little kids. I don't want all these chemicals coming up and down the road, being injected into the wells. I'm concerned with that myself. I don't know what other companies have put in other places, so I can't, speak to that. There's no wells currently being fracked here, being used to put anything in. There's no wells being drilled. So, I just never heard it called slick water, I'm sorry, Art.
Yeah, well, that's the term we heard a couple of times, I just thought you might have known it offhand.
No, I just had to get to the terminology that I knew.
Like you say, I mean, to work with the gas company, that's a very good idea, but if we can't do anything legally, what the hell's the sense of bothering it? 'Cause we're not gonna get anywhere.
I think you can. It has to do with the home rule, and you set in some of these, the issues that are at hand that you know of, start working on them now. If you put in a moratorium, from the time the SGS comes through, that would give you time to then work on the other things, and then you have time to work on it. But right now, I honestly don't believe it fits the criteria for a valid moratorium. I don't believe so. That probably would, because then whatever came out that you haven't had time to address. But once again, the road use and the water and a lot of the things, the time's been ticking for years now. And now, I guess I just don't understand, so.
Well, probably your idea of a moratorium after the report comes out. Trouble is, right now, I guess some people have parts of what's gonna come out, but nobody has the whole report, we don't even know what the hell.
No, because until it comes out, it's not official, so it doesn't really, you have things that you can work on and you know that it's gonna be, there's issues that we all know, the roads, and how they're gonna be worked, we've got one of the most beautiful, we've got a couple of the best lakes in my opinion in the state. Can you protect them? I don't know, but have you gone to your attorneys to try and see, is there any of this that you can do,
Well, our town attorney told me right now, he doesn't know anything about the gas business, there's very few that do. And also, Albany, the Association of Towns, I call those lawyers up there, and they said it's a whole new ballgame, this whole thing is a big picture, it's a whole new ballgame. And they don't really know how the hell to answer you too much either.
And we just heard tonight about the regulatory taking. That's the big concern. If there's not something in place before the permits are issued, and then you do try to do something, then you've opened yourself up for the lawsuits, because now you're preventing them from, carrying it.
Yes, I understand what you're saying, Terry. On the other hand, what I'm saying is what I believe you've done by the moratorium at this point, I don't know if it'll be valid. Because without the permits and the SGIS being passed, what is the imminent risk hazard at hand?
But there's no cause, maybe. Like tonight, I stated here, and the lawyer says, and I figured he probably would say that, really and truly, the fair way is, we're elected here to represent everybody in the town, not just one segment of the town. And it's too damn bad the town can't vote on which way they wanna go, but you can't do that.
I agree, that,
They got it all tied up so that they got it working pretty well, the law business.
There was a time limit, wasn't there?
Yeah, I said I was over my
5
time,
minutes.
I'm definitely, thank you.
All right.
Okay, if one of the pros can talk to someone.
Yeah, in
Well, we'll
regards
try
to,
I'm sorry.
that's right.
Well, it's just, you got 2 sets of standards here.
No.
In regard, Jeff, to the petitions that you asked about,
I think you gave me 5 minutes.
I'm sorry, I did raise my hand and I was pointed
called
to,
on me,
that's
though.
why I was
Called
gonna
on me.
begin. Carry on.
Victor Furman, I'm field director for the Drought Owners Coalition. I'd like to say, because I was preempted by Mr. Slottje, I'm the guy that was in the back we were talking about. And that can right there, it's full of magic air and a letter that I wrote. If each of you take a sip of that, you're gonna lose 10 years off your life, excuse me, 10 years, you're gonna add 10 years to your life, you're gonna lose all your body fat, and you're gonna be smart.
I tell you what.
No, I'm just trying to make a point.
You're trying to make a point.
I'm trying to make a point. Now, Mr. Slottje says that you have no power to regulate, power station, pipeline, compressor station. I asked you to call Carolyn Price up in Windsor and ask her about that. They regulate the noise in the Windsor, pipeline station all the time, the compressor station. It's regulated down to 8 decibels. You have a lot of power to do a lot of different things. Road use agreements, Broome County has a terrific one, look it up. You don't need, Mr. Slottje says, put in the moratorium, we got 150 of them. Most of those are expired, by the way. They were put in 4 and 5 years ago, and they were 1 and 2 year moratoriums, and they have expired without being renewed, except for the town of Caroline. They went from a moratorium to a complete ban. Oxford does not have a ban or a moratorium in place. That's not true. You can call the lawyer, he's your lawyer, you can ask him, he'll tell you. There's no ban or moratorium in Oxford. Why are we here? I notice on the bottom of your list here, one of the things you're doing is voting on fuel. Where's the common sense in this? For 5 years, you've been having these meetings, and I've talked to a few of you, and you're sick of them. You're on the spot, you're losing sleep, you're sick of these meetings. And you should be, but why are we here? First it was water. The water is all contaminated. They brought brown jugs of water. And in Philadelphia, they actually confiscated one of them brown jugs of water, had it tested. And you can look this up on the internet. That brown jug of water turned out to be iced tea that an anti-driller brought to the meeting and was trying to scare the town folk with. Now, we're here first because it was the water. When that fell through, when the 61 wells in Dimmock were tested, where the people said the water was bad and all the water buffaloes, they begged the EPA to come in and test it. They did it. They said, hey, guess what? Your water's not poisoned. There's no frac fluid, nothing in it, except for common earth material, common earth metals like barium, strontium, other metals. I can't think of them all right now. Just yeah. Now, you guys got to use common sense. You 5-2 or 3-2 vote means there won't be asked to go to the town or the county, and I'm glad of that because the county is going to kick it back and say you need a supermajority. And I hope you two people that vote no again when it comes back, because what you're seeing here is fear. All this is based on fear. Most of the people in here are from Norwich and other towns. They're not even from your town. And I'm not from your town either, but I represent people in your town.
What do you fear about a moratorium?
Well, why would you put a moratorium in?
What do you fear about?
I don't fear it. The only reason that Mr. Slottje is fighting for moratorium here is because, one, there isn't one in Shenango County. He wants to get this first one in. He says they don't serve any other purpose other than protecting the town. Yet every time I go to Albany, and I go to Albany a lot, what do? They say, we got 150 towns. We don't want drilling in New York. So that right there is a powerful tool that you need to fear because it's not true. And if you did put it to referendum, I'm sure the town would vote in favor of gas drilling. I think that what you're hearing from is a lot of people who come in here from Norwich and from Guilford. And
Where are you from?
I'm from the Joint Land Owners Coalition.
I don't know where you live.
I already told these guys where I'm from. I'm not here to debate with you. I'm talking to them.
We just want to know where you live.
Get out.
We live here. And I think
I
it's 5
represent
minutes
people
is
that live
up.
here.
Tough shit.
You don't represent
Yeah,
me.
well,
Time putting that into it.
Okay, meeting's closed. What do you say?
Yeah, I agree. Meeting's closed.
Can I add
Fuck y'all.
something?
All right, come on.
That was nice.
That was nice of you. Real hostile.
I do live in this town, and regarding Jeff's question about the petitions, we've actually asked 338 folks. We have 283 signatures on the petition now. I'd like to submit a few more to the town clerk if I may. 11 people, thank you, have said that their decision is not reached and they're on the fence, and 44 people said that they're pro-gas and would not sign the petition. So, for the folks we've asked so far, clearly most people do not want this in our town. And I would like to actually commend the three of you that were willing to allow yourselves to be educated about this topic, that have reached out a little to both sides to see what people's concerns were for both sides of the fence. And for the other two of you, I would encourage you again to please visit Pennsylvania, to please allow yourselves to talk to folks on the other side of the fence and really hear what their concerns are. I happen to like the town the way it was when I moved here 8 years ago. I know there are issues monetarily. I think there are a lot of folks in this town that are willing to really think outside the box to help the town out and not resort to this, which would change our way of life a lot. And it does seem to me that thus far of the folks that have been asked, it's overwhelmingly opposed to this coming here. So commend you three, thank you.
My name's Steve Elser, I'm from McDonough. I just want to let you know that I attended the Caroline Road Preservation Law Forum number 3, and I have the PowerPoints for those 3 forums. I have the first 2 forums on DVD, and I'm waiting for the 3rd, and I'll get that to the town board and road supervisor before the next meeting, so you could look that over before you talk about your...
Did they, work on their law 8 months? Right, committee working on it?
They're working on it. They have a
Do
road
they have it
preservation...
finished yet, or they don't have it?
No, they're still having discussion. I got an email from their supervisor today about that. But anyway, this, this timeout that we might have if we have a moratorium, to do road preservation law and talk about maybe banning the spreading of road brine on the things. Another thing I found was they have a master plan in Middlefield that looks very simple. It's just 4 sentences, the basic part of it, just as a start for maybe a comprehensive plan. It might be good for McDonough, and I'd just like to read it, substituting McDonough for Middlefield and taking out the planning board part. Okay, the master plan for the township of McDonough establishes 4 general goals. 1, that the senior citizens of the township who have stewarded these lands in such a way as to deliver them to the younger generation in a beneficial condition may continue to live here in a manner which they find harmonious. Number 2, the men and women of the current generation who live and work on these lands may prosper in an environment that is both flexible and secure. 3, that perhaps more importantly, future generations shall inherit these lands in a condition which allows for a healthful, prosperous, and independent way of life. 4, the improvement of land be encouraged and fostered in a manner which benefits the community as a whole, but that development of the land in a manner which threatens the health and well-being of the community as a whole be prevented. Thanks.
One quick question for you. How are you making out on the survey of...
The survey, well, I thought we were gonna wait to do a moratorium for the survey, and the survey, by the way, is gonna go out to all the town people, including the people that aren't here too.
Okay, I thought you were starting on that a couple months ago, and...
Well, last town meeting, we talked about it, right?
Yeah,
When
you were
Kelly
working
was here
on
or
it.
something, yeah. We're working on getting that list
So
together.
when can we expect some results?
I don't know, 2-3 months, I don't know.
Okay,
When we get 'em.
that's the answer we got last time.
Yeah.
Okay, I just was curious, I thought we were gonna
Yeah.
have it by now,
Well,
so.
No, it's,
I
I'm
mean,
sorry,
we
if I could
thought it
jump
would not
back
be a
in.
good thing to do if we didn't have a moratorium to give ourselves time
Well,
to do
I-
some of these things. And the survey
Yeah,
was
just
one of those
that-
things.
If they'd let me put it to a vote, which the law won't,
I
you
know.
wouldn't
Well,
have to take
I
it.
was under the impression a few meetings ago that it was underway and was gonna be
It is.
carried out, but,
It is underway.
so a couple more months, so maybe by August, September.
Well, I hope before
Okay,
the election.
I'll keep asking every month. That's fine.
Well, I made the point too that, Nancy has been doing these petitions, which that certainly shows some kind of
I've
effort
yet
to
to be
get.
asked,
Actually, you were an assumed no, but I
that's
can
that's
come knock
fine,
on
you
your
can,
door.
an
and-
assumption get you?
I think your door was knocked on by another, neighborhood helper.
I did.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I thought somebody did knock.
This lady behind Nancy, did you want to ask a question?
I wanted to make us, first of all, I'm very happy to have come to this meeting and to see how communicative many of the board members are. It's been a big pleasure. I'm new to town politics. I've gone to many board meetings, and I'm very impressed with the town of McDonough.
What was your name, ma'am?
and then my next subject was to just,
What was your name, ma'am?
excuse me, you will hear me, and please don't interrupt me.
Okay, I just wanted to know who you were.
I heard you. I'm
Okay.
still talking. I recently attended a
Who's in charge of the
committee
board?
on open government, which was chaired by, presented by Robert Freeman. I was already very familiar with rules of open government due to reading up on it after having gone to some board meetings where residents only were permitted to enter first, or only residents were permitted to speak. And that was brand new to me. I was really amazed. These are something called sunshine laws, that were passed in the 1970s. And under these laws, a public meeting, by definition, is public. Anyone can attend it. And the commentary in regard to that is whether or not you should say where you're from or what your name is. The commentary is, it is to go to a public meeting and to speak, it's best to be anonymous in some cases because one could lose one's job. One could have one's children harassed, say at a school board meeting. You could have different interests for going to a public meeting. You might live in that town, you might own property in that town, you might want to purchase property in that town or invest. It's not required to give your name or where you're from. And I'm proud to say that in my town of Guilford, forgive me for...
What's that got to do about the gas, John, and our,
Yeah.
come on.
What does this do about the gas?
Yeah.
I think it's very important for people who attend a meeting to understand the rules of the meeting, and there has been some discussion here about where you're from, et cetera, and I'm just referencing that no matter what is under discussion at the board meeting, anyone, if you allow public comment, you're not required to give your name or where you're from. And in my town, you just take a number if you want to speak. If you want to be in the minutes, you have to give your name. One last thing about Norse Energy. Norse Energy, as I understand it, I don't have a fabulous memory anymore, is under Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and it will not be drilling. It's trying to sell its leases, so there's no guarantee, even if Norse says, well, we'll just use food level or food grade, whatever. The leases will be sold, and we don't know to what companies.
Okay, well,
What
thank you
will
very much.
happen in the
One
future.
thing I wanna bring up, number one, I feel it's common courtesy in a meeting when you stand up and talk to state your name and where you live. Number two, I'm an American, I live in McDonough, and I am proud to say my name.
Wait a minute,
Good for
John.
you, I'm an Army brat, just
Wait a
figure
minute,
out where
John.
I'm from.
This young lady over here probably wants to talk.
Me?
Yeah.
I was gonna let my husband go.
Oh, let him, I don't.
But, no, we can go together.
I'm Jim Robb. I think mostly everybody knows me here. The question I have is, he was talking about, you have to enact this moratorium before the regulations come out, if they release them.
Before the permit.
Now, if they release these things to come out to allow the drilling, he doesn't have any court cases that can provide his information saying that your moratorium will hold up then. Because it hasn't happened, right?
Well, so far up in Middlefield and Dryden, I guess they've held up so far.
Yeah, but they haven't released, the state hasn't released the moratorium
So
yet.
you don't know what's gonna
So-
happen with your moratorium when they release the rules.
Well, if this here, law, this money.
But he had no information on that though. He had speculation.
Well, like I call Albany, there's Association of Towns, we do business with a bunch of lawyers up there, we pay $500 a year for that. And the way they told me, really and truly, this is a whole brand new ball game, and they're not too damn familiar with any of it. So it's gonna be kind of a toss-up, what's really gonna
So
happen.
you're kinda taking a big chance here, right?
Well, we're not really, because the state so far has got a moratorium on. Now, they're
Right.
probably gonna have that for another year, because they're not gonna do a hell of a lot yet. And this is only gonna be for a year, and if, by that time, we get to study it and find out what all this is about. See, we've heard all the anti for months. Now we'd like to hear some of the pro-gas people and what they gotta say and what the science is and stuff.
But you just
But we
enacted
haven't had a
something
chance to
with
hear
us.
that yet.
We have heard from pro-gas people over the course of the last 2
Well,
years.
we've only started, really.
Hasn't been quite
Well,
as many as.
I've been here and it's been drowned out by the anti-gas. every board meeting, so.
Well, that's not our fault.
No, no, and you didn't know what to do until, you know, you started getting the propaganda from them and stuff too, so. The other thing is, like he was talking about that dump yard, that dump thing. I mean, the next town over is the largest dump in the area, you know,
Yes,
so.
this area.
It
You
has
know,
to
and
go.
we have no choice in that. And not only that, when the last flood came, they decided to bring garbage from Broome County up and dump it in our next town over, so.
God knows what was in it, right?
Right, it was flood waste, right? They had lots of petroleum and all that in there. That's it, that's all I wanna say.
Okay, thank you.
Well, my name is Carrie Robb, and I do live in McDonough. And my whole point is that I have spring water, I have a young boy. You think that I wanna drink poison water? Do you think I wanna get sick? Do you think I want anybody here to get sick? I don't want that to happen to anybody. But you know what? What we use to be able to see in this building? You know, NYSEG does use natural gas to produce electricity. And if it can be done safely, and we can all benefit from this, if it can be, and because you don't know, you doubt it. You know, everybody had to try something at one point to get further in
Like
life.
flying.
So, my whole point is if it can be done safely and we can benefit from that, why wouldn't we want to? But again, I don't want anybody getting poisoned. I don't want my son. I drink spring water. I don't want that ruined. I just think that, and I don't mean insult to any of you, but I really don't think that any of you are really qualified to make a decision. I think the state knows better. I mean, they're already telling you about your sand. You guys didn't know where to put your sand or what to do with it. You did it wrong, right?
But look, we're
You
still
did it
gonna have
wrong,
a-
right? You had diesel tanks leaking. You did it wrong. But yet you're gonna make a big decision on this and you have no qualification. That's just my point, is that I think in this aspect, we should let the state decide. That's all. Thank you for your time.
Yes, my name's Jim Lobdell, and I was born and raised in McDonough. I'm still a Chenango County resident. What I see is the people that are against gas are gonna be against it no matter what. I mean, I could bring 50 of the top scientists of the world in here and tell you it's safe. You're not gonna believe me. Last year, I was down to Silver Lake, Pennsylvania, at a fire department fundraiser. There's over 5,000 tickets sold to that. I said to my brother who went down with me, I said, I'm gonna just walk the crowd. So if I ran into somebody from New York, I said, no, I'm looking for somebody from PA. When I found somebody, I'd say, what do you think about gas? Loved it. 44 people I talked to on that Saturday from Silver Lake Township. Not one person said anything bad about gas. Family was employed, they were employed, business was booming if they had a business. The road usage, if there was a problem with the road, the gas fixed it. I believe there's 6 lakes in that township, they're all being monitored. Not one negative comment. Last week I was at a doctor's appointment in Vestal. Lady come in, the nurse, and she said, yeah, I drove in from Pennsylvania. I said, what do you think about gas? And she says, natural gas? And I said, yes. She goes, personally, I love it. My son works for Cabot. My husband has a auto parts in Pennsylvania. We're putting down a big addition. Business is booming. So again, I don't care. There's pros and antis, and that's how it's going to be. The antis, you couldn't bring them in. I don't think I could bring you in if I had 50 lawyers here or 50 of the top scientists. You wouldn't change your mind, Harvey. So all I'm saying is, when people say you got to get out and talk to people, I did. I probably talked to 53 people in Pennsylvania.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Now, I don't doubt a bit what you're telling me, that all these people are prospering down there. But now what's gonna happen when all the drilling's done and they all leave there? Is it gonna, I mean, the gas, the people's got the wells, they're still gonna make money, but what's gonna happen? Is it gonna be last?
Well, as far as I can see, what people tell me, it's not just gonna come for a year and go. But look at McDonough. Come on, people. What do we have in McDonough? When I lived here in McDonough, we had a nice village. People gave a hoot about what the hell was here. People don't work today. The stores closed,
Yep, restaurants. go.
restaurants
Look
closed.
at
What the hell are you
Detroit.
gonna do to bring it back, Terry?
Look at Detroit.
I'm talking about McDonough, I can give
Well,
a
I
shit
know,
about
but it's the
Detroit.
same thing
Okay?
across the nation.
I don't
It's
care
not
about
just
that,
McDonough.
okay? But it's just like the people that I've talked to. I mean, you see something on the website, oh, there's a dead cow in the ditch. That's not from fracking. I mean, people are feared, everybody gets so feared up on this crap. So, that's my comment, so, have a good night.
Come on, right up there.
I just soon tell you who I am. My name's Will Bradley. I'm from Oxford. And actually what I'd like to do is set the record straight here as far as Oxford is concerned. Was very involved with that whole process down there with the desire for the mayor to get a moratorium imposed in the village of Oxford. I was not the architect of that particular piece of legislation in the village, that they want, whatever you would like to call it. But what we did is actually at the meeting they were going to vote on a moratorium, is they were presented with a letter of intent. It was no more than that, it wasn't a threat, this is what we're going to do. They went into executive session at that point in time for about half an hour. Then they came back out and they decided to table it. So then it went from there to a matter of a zoning clarification, is what it actually ended up being, that's what they called it. And the architect of that, that's what we're going to do. This isn't a ban, it's a clarification. Well, tonight, it was called a ban more than once. Oxford does not have a ban on natural gas development, the village of Oxford. There is a variance provision in that zoning that will allow for it to happen if it did. Subsurface exploration was not involved in that piece of information. It was not part of the zoning. And it still isn't now. And the reason for that is they didn't know how to address that, because we don't know that yet. So I would just like you to really understand that you can say here, and unfortunately it was one-sided with the argument, and listened to the same story multiple times up here, actually, even unfortunately. And just the truth is important, and it needs to come from both sides. And also heard about, before I walked in, it was brought up, Vera Schreigens down in Pennsylvania, that one of you on the board evidently was familiar with her, okay? I'm familiar with her also, and have you seen any of the videos with her and Meckley, which did the Frack Nation documentary? And if you have, or if you haven't and you were interested, I'd be more than glad to show you where to go to get that. And I think you'll be less impressed with her than you might have been there. Her language would have unfortunately put Vic to shame, and I apologize, he got a little carried away on the way out, he tends to get hot. I'll apologize for him. But if you listen to what Vera had to say and a lot of the things she's involved with, you might change your opinion about her a little bit too.
Where can we get this?
Pardon me?
Where can we get this?
Where can I get it to you? Okay, I'll get you the website. It's on YouTube, you can see it anywhere, but I'll get you specific where you can go to it, because it was pretty enlightening, and it shows you what her character is all about. Unfortunately, you guys didn't allow public comment before your vote tonight. I would have really liked to see that, because what I was gonna ask you to do is actually ask for a hands indication of the people just from McDonough. Those of us from outside McDonough, I'd like to see them handle this, not people from outside. I don't like to see all the outsiders in here. And that's why I'm not addressing any specific, I'm telling you it's good, bad, indifferent. I'm just trying to give you some information. What I would like to see is a show of hands from the people of McDonough that were pro-gas development, natural gas development, and those who are anti-natural gas development. And I think you would actually have been surprised at how close those numbers were, and you wouldn't have to let maybe a fear factor be involved tonight. So, thanks for your time, appreciate it very much, good luck. I'm sorry?
Don't forget to get it to me.
I won't, I'll get it to all of you, I'll get it so you all have it, okay? I'll let you see what Vera's really like. All right, thank you.
Does anybody else want anything to speak here tonight? No? Okay then.
make a motion that we adjourn this meeting.
Favor, aye.
I don't know.
I'll second.